A very warm welcome to all participants who have joined us today, and a very warm welcome to all our speakers today who have made such an event possible. Thank you so much. I'm Jagjit Lahe, Associate Professor of International Political Economy in the Department of Management at Monash University. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Anita Foster for the welcome note. Anita is an associate professor in environmental and climate law at the Monash Business School and director of the business school's Green Lab. Anita's research uses socio-legal methods to explore how law and regulation develop, how they are implemented, and what effect they have in practice. Over to you, Anita.
Thank you very much, Jagjit. It's a great pleasure to be invited to join this webinar today and offer some brief opening remarks. I'd like to begin by acknowledging Australia's First Peoples and noting that Monash University in its Australian campuses operates on the lands of the peoples of the East Kulin Nations, and that sovereignty over these lands has never been ceded. I'd like to acknowledge the long, the deep, and the continuing connection to country that our First Peoples in Australia have, but also the historical injustices and the far-reaching and ongoing impacts of colonisation. I'd like to recognise that we have so much to learn from the experiences and the different ways of knowing of our First Nations peoples. And I'm very hopeful that later this year we will see the beginnings of change in the governance of Australia that gives our First Peoples a long overdue and a much stronger voice through constitutional reform and the introduction of an Indigenous voice to Parliament. So as Jagjit said, I'm an academic working in environmental and climate change law. In my role here at Monash Business School, I have the privilege of leading Green Lab, a new network of sustainability and climate change researchers from across our faculty, from our disciplines of management, accounting, economics, banking and finance, and law. And the work at Green Lab focuses very much on engaging meaningfully with government, with civil society and community stakeholders, and with industry. And we really seek to target our research to contribute to society's response to climate change and other sustainability challenges. And I think the work that we're going to hear about today in this webinar aligns very well with Green Lab's approach, and indeed sits within one of Green Lab's main research themes, optimal adaptation to climate change impacts. And I'd like to thank the Monash academics involved, Jagjit Lahe and Professor Gavin Jacks, for their support for Green Lab and for generously sharing their approaches to academic research that really value partnerships with community and with civil society. I'm particularly excited to be at this webinar, feeling climate change to the bone, for a number of reasons. Firstly, I think in another year that has seen such terrible climate-related disasters wreak devastation around the world, and in the lead up to COP28, the next international meeting under the UN FCCC Framework Convention on Climate Change later this year, at which the international community appears to be finally ready to progress an international approach to loss and damage caused by climate change. In that context, I think it's so timely and so important that we reflect on the fact that the victims of climate change are people. They're people that are part of families, people that are part of communities, people that are deeply attached to place. And people's experience of climate change around the world is determined very much by the fairness and the resilience of our social and economic structures and institutions. And I think the work that we're going to hear about in this webinar really, really brings this home. And just finally, on a personal note, if I may, I spent 12 months living in the Philippines in 2015 with my family. So the people of this beautiful country are very dear to my heart. And of course, 2015 was just a year after the devastating Typhoon Yolanda that led to such devastation in Leyte. And even though we ourselves were based in a different part of the Philippines, we were witness to many of the personal stories and the deep shock that reverberated through the country at that time. And I know the Philippines is a country that's also, of course, very well accustomed to rebuilding after events like typhoons, but coming to grips with the prospect that climate change will worsen these tropical storms and lead to a range of other impacts is of course huge, and was very huge at the time. So I'm really looking forward to hearing directly from MASIPAG, a grassroots organisation that's focused on social and economic change in response to climate change, and that's focused on climate justice. So thank you very much to everyone involved, and I'm very much looking forward to the presentations.
Thank you so very much, Anita, for that beautiful welcome. Now, it is widely recognized that the world needs to support resilience to climate change by facilitating the expansion of low-carbon agroecological farming systems. Now, while the agri-food sector is a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, agricultural production, which involves millions of farming households worldwide, is highly vulnerable to climate change. So fostering both climate smart and climate resilient agriculture and food systems will be vital to support decarbonization and to ensure livelihood security. Small-scale farming is the backbone of rural resilience to external shocks in the global south, and this was certainly what we saw when the COVID-19 pandemic hit the globe. Small-scale farmers who grow 70% of the world's food need to be supported for the pivotal role they play in food production and as those who are most exposed to climate change as the planet heats up. This webinar is entitled Feeling Climate Change to the Bone. The work and understandings of climate change are heavily based on technocentric frames, which lead to partial responses that largely ignore the voices of those on the ground who are most affected. There is thus an urgent need to co-develop analysis with affected communities for whom this is a lived and embodied experience. In this webinar, we hear from those who are most affected in the Philippines. MASIPAG, which stands for Farmers Scientist Partnership for Development, is a network of small-scale farmers, landless agricultural workers, and Indigenous peoples, their people's organizations, and of NGOs and scientists with approximately 30,000 members. Members of MASIPAG will focus on three key themes. The first one is knowing climate. They will discuss their past and ongoing experiences in facing catastrophic climate change. The second is organizing for change. MASIPAG will share the multi-pronged strategies that they have developed to address climate change. These include embracing agroecology, and in particular, focusing on the role of youth and women in sustainable development and in equitable agri-food practices. And thirdly, climate change justice. They will share their rich experiences in advocating for climate justice at community, regional, national, and international levels. So without further ado, I now invite Giori Pitong from MASIPAG to give us a welcome note from the Philippines. Giori is the Visayas Regional Coordinator of MASIPAG. She has been with the MASIPAG Visayas Secretariat since the year 2000, coordinating the network partner NGOs and scientists, supporting the program implementation and regional activities in the Visayas region. Over to you, Giori.
Thank you, Jagjet. Good afternoon. Hello. Good day, everyone. Just last week, here in the Philippines, we experienced strong typhoons, one coming after another, which enhanced the effects of the southwest monsoons, resulting to landslides in mountain areas and widespread flooding in the low-lying plains. Then, we are anticipating a stronger El Niño weather phenomenon starting next month that, according to Pag-asa Weather Bureau, will stretch up to the first quarter of next year. This is a real big challenge to local food production and our food security. So we feel climate change to the bone, and we witness that the most devastated and heavily suffering from its impacts, physically, emotionally, psychologically, economically, are the small and vulnerable groups of our society, as what we see those who work to conserve nature and who depend much their livelihood and sustainability from nature's biodiversity. Way back in 2017, collaboration started between MASIPAG and Monash University through a research fellowship on equitable and sustainable food systems and climate change. Again, with Monash, together with Ms. Sarah Wright of the University of Newcastle, this collaboration brings forth another joint undertaking, this webinar. So on behalf of MASIPAG, I am very glad to welcome you all to engage in this very relevant issue at hand, as we bring you not only an academic discussion, but lived experiences of affected communities. We hope this webinar could spark a start of fostering solidarity between impacted communities, the academic sector, civil society, and advocates towards amplifying our call for accountability and climate justice. So once again, from the Philippines and MASIPAG, welcome to this event. Good day and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jury, for that wonderful welcome from the Philippines and for sharing what's going on in the Philippines with us. Now, we are quite a few in the room, over 70 of us. So if you have a question, please kindly use the Q&A function and I will direct your question to the speakers. Right, I now invite the first speaker of our webinar today, Professor Gavin Jack. Gavin is the head of the Department of Management at Monash University. Gavin's multidisciplinary research interests and expertise include workplace diversity and inclusion, post-colonial organization studies, sustainable agricultural development, and qualitative and critical management research methods. Gavin will focus on understanding climate change beyond technocentrism. Over to you, Gavin.
Thank you, Jagjit. Thank you, Anita, and particularly thank you to Jory and all our friends and colleagues in MASIPAG and in the Philippines. It's really so wonderful to see you all today and to be sharing in this webinar, and a particular welcome to all our attendees today. On behalf of the Management Department at Monash University, welcome and thank you for attending and for your participation today. I have around 5 minutes to really unpack the idea and the necessity for us to develop knowledge and understanding of climate and climate change and adaptive responses to climate change beyond dominant technocentric or technoscientific frames, which Jagjit prefaced at the beginning of our webinar today. I have a couple of slides, so if you just give me a few seconds, I'll share the screen and talk to those, and then I will hand over, because we have the privilege today of hearing from MASIPAG representatives, coordinators and farmers about the lived experience of what's going on in the ground. So I'm just going to share my slides. And hopefully everyone can see those. So I also wish, before I'm making some introductory remarks, to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we meet today, and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging here in Australia, and to Indigenous communities and representatives overseas. As Anita said, sovereignty over these lands has never been ceded, and so we meet on colonised and occupied lands today, and we acknowledge that and thank elders for allowing us to meet on their lands. So technocentrism, so to start off with, the first point of departure for these comments about technocentrism is to make the remark, I suppose, that the ways in which we know climate and climate change matter. So knowing and ways of knowing are crucially important. How we represent climate change matters, and those, as Anita prefaced earlier, are infused with social structures and with different tomographies of power. But what we see, I think, in the academic debate at the moment, and particularly in public policy and organizational debates, is an overweening faith in the power of technology, both to understand the nature of climate change, but then to posit solutions also for climate change. So technocentrism seems to be the dominant form and the dominant way of knowing how climate and climate change are understood and interpreted, and how they should then be responded to. And there are a number of ways in which that technocentric framework, I think, manifests in our dominant ways of knowing within our institutions at the moment. So here on the slide, I've got a couple of examples of where this technocentrism is manifest. First of all, it's manifest in the various mathematical models of the physical processes linked to climate change and climate model projections. So mathematical modeling is one way in which knowledge about climate and changes in climate can be circulated in quite an abstract way and decontextualized and then shared with a variety of communities in policy circles and beyond. So this mathematical modeling, these global circulation models, are crucial ways in which we know, and since they're mathematically grounded, also technological ways of knowing and very particular ways of knowing. These ways of knowing are circulated by dominant institutions within our context, particularly through the IPCC and through the UN Climate Technology Centre, which place a faith in technology transfer as a way of both understanding and responding to climate and to climate change. Yet within this dominant framework, there have been questions that have emerged, not least from a recent study within the Quarterly Journal of Economics, which you can see there up on the screen, which has suggested that technology can in fact save us in entirety from the worst effects of climate change, that there's been too much faith in technoscientific and technologically driven solutions, and not enough paying attention to local and grounded experiences of climate and of changing climate. And that, as Jacob Moscana says up there, we cannot simply innovate our way out of the danger of climate change. In other words, here, what he's talking about is that market-based solutions, technological innovations from private corporations, whilst they may have some potential benefits, cannot solve these problems themselves. So what we get from in this technocentric view, this dominant framing, is a very partial way of knowing, as Jagjit was saying, climate change. But one thing that it does is really to ignore the voices of those who are most affected by climate change on the ground, and crucially also to obscure the situated nature of climate adaptation, and instead to replace the situated nature and local understandings with more abstracted scientific modeling that doesn't particularly well represent that first-hand experience. So ways of knowing are important then because representation matters. How we come to know climate difference and climate change and ways of adapting matters. And here's a quote from O'Lear, which I think really sums up well the problem of technocentrism is its reliance on grand narratives of mathematical natural science, which erase or significantly discount the presence of humans and hide uneven power and social relations rooted in neoliberalism. And they serve really to undermine the potential for conversations about climate justice, which Jory talked about importantly, but the many power-laden and diverse ways in which different communities experience climate change, but importantly also the ways in which solutions are imagined and practiced. And if you look to the right of my slide here, this is a wonderful drawing of a diverse integrated farming system from one of the farming communities in the MASIPAG network that we had the pleasure of learning from in some of our fieldwork, that show the importance of grounded understandings and meaning making of climate and climate change, but also that importantly teach us something from farmers' own first-hand experience and expertise about place-based responses, place-based ways of knowing climate and climate adaptation. So I just wanted to share those as a starting point, which really arrives us at this need for developing understandings beyond these technocentric frameworks, to understand that those technocentric frameworks are one way of knowing, but it's important that we encourage and acknowledge diverse ways of knowing, particularly from those working in the grassroots context in the Global South. And that's why we're so privileged today to hear from our colleagues in MASIPAG firsthand of the amazing work that they do, and of the amazing work of the farmers in those contexts around knowing climate. And so it's my great pleasure to hand over to our colleagues in MASIPAG to hear more from these experiences of climate felt to the bone and beyond technocentric frameworks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gavin, for outlining that so well. So beyond technocentrism, beyond techno-capitalism, beyond techno-optimism, and now indeed techno-nationalism, how can we imagine solutions? And it all starts with the imagination. So how can we imagine solutions so that we have more diverse ways of knowing, but more diverse ways of moving forward? We'll now hear from people who have imagined and have indeed gone forward and done things differently. We'll hear from Virginia Prudente Nazareno, who is the chairman of the Board of Trustees of MASIPAG. She will focus on the theme of knowing climate. She's the advisor of the Kide Community Farmers Association in General Nakar, Quezon Province. Nane Verji, as she's fondly called, is a farmer trainer who specializes in organic agriculture production, organizational development, food processing, and marketing. Over to you, Nane Verji.
Sige, magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. Ang aking pong ibabahagi ay tunay naming karanasan ng mga magsasaka na kung saan kami ay nasa malapit sa kabundukan. At ang aking pong ibabahagi ay yung aming ang nangyari. Ang arena area po ay binubuo ng mga...
So, I will be translating for her. You will be seeing the English translation on the presentation, but she will be presenting in Filipino. So, good afternoon, everyone. She said, I am Virginia Prudente from General Nakar, Quezon, and I will be sharing our experience in Quezon Province.
Kung akin pong presentation ay ang arena area ay binubuo ng mga munisipyong nakaharap at napapaligiran ng Sierra Madre kasama ang Real, Infanta at General Nakar sa probinsya ng Quezon. Noong November 29, 2004, sinagasa kami ng tropical depression na Winnie na nagdulot ng malawakang pagkasira at pagkawala ng buhay. Nasa 100 at 1,500 ang namatay at 900 ang nawala sa Infanta, Real at General Nakar, Quezon. So nasa 80% ng aming lugar ay natabunan ng lupa, putik, mga truso at malahiganting bato mula sa kabundukan. Pagkatapos ng bagyo, umagos mula sa kabundukan ang mga higanting truso at tinabunan ng mga ito ang aming mga bahay, mga kalsada at sakahan. Tapos po ay noong panahon na yun, umugong ang ulan na parang galing sa ilalim ng lupa. Ang ugong, walang isang oras ay lumuhos na ang malakas na baha. Tubig mula sa sapa at balunggo ng mga puno ay bapas mula sa, at ang iba ay mula sa ilog ng Agus River. Hanggang bigla ng tubig sa loob ng aming bahay ay paikot-ikot ako habang ang asawa at mga anak ko ay kanya-kanya ng hakot ng aming mga gamit. Ayaw kong umalis, ayaw kong iwan ang aming bahay. Halos isang oras lang ang biglang bugso at tumati na ang tubig. Pagkatapos ng bagyo, nalaman na lang namin na ang 30 sako ng palay ay nadala ng baha. Ang mga puno ng niyog, mga gamit sa bahay ay natabunan ng lupa at buhangin ang aming sakahan. Isang linggo akong tulala. Gusto ko na lumipat kami ng bahay. Ang kinakain namin ay ubod ng niyog na may hipon galing sa ilog. yun na rin po yung aming ulam at kanin noong mga panahon yun. Wala pang isang linggo ay may paparating na lamang bagyo at yun ay ang bagyong Siyuyong. Lumikas na kami, napapaluhan na lang ako kapag maalala ko ang baha. Tapos po ay nangumupa ang bagyo, sinimulan ng Social Action Center ng Infanta ang Relief Rehabilitation and Livelihood Program para sa apektadong komunidad. Yun po makikita natin sa mga picture ang ginawa ng Social Action Center sa aming lugar nung humupa na yung bagyo.
So we can see in the photos that the Social Action Center started at the meetings with farmers and members of the community.
Nakipag-ugnayan po ang Social Action Center and Panta sa MASIPAG para sa rehabilitation ng aming mga sakahan at una silang ipinakilala sa Kupar, isang samahan sa Real Quezon. Kalaunan ay maraming samahan ang sumali at nagtayo ng sariling trial farm. Mula dito ay nagsimula na ang aming mahabang ugnayan sa MASIPAG. At sa ugnayang ito, natutunan naming paunlarin ang laksang buhay sa aming komunidad upang makaangkop sa pagbabago ng klima kasama na ang pagpapaunlad at pagpapunta sa kabundukan at kapaligiran. Tapos kailangan na nananatili ang pagpaplano ng pamilya at ng organisasyon ay para maging handa sa anumang dulot ng climate change. O sige po, makikita po natin na kami ay naorganisa namin ang aming sarili upang muling buuin ang aming komunidad, kabuhayan at kapaligiran. Yan po makikita natin sa larawan kung ano na yung ginagawa ng mga magsasaka.
So we can see in the photos that we have started to organize ourselves, and one of the important thing here is that planning is very crucial, especially in preparation for the typhoons and other calamities in the community.
Palakasin ang hanay ng kababaihan at kabataan upang manguna sa pangangalaga ng kalikasan at pagsusulong ng likaskayang pagsasaka. So makikita po natin sa picture kung ano na yung aming tuloy-tuloy na ginagawa at kung paano namin inu-organize yung mga kabataan namin. Pinag-aralan namin ang mga pamamaraan upang tuloy-tuloy ang aming pagpapayabong ng aming kalikasan.
So we learn the ways on how we can protect the environment and also enhance our forest.
Tapos ay naglusad kami ng iba't ibang halimbawa magtatanim kami ng mga puno gamit ang mga katutubong punong kahoy kasama ang kabataan upang higit nilang mapalalim ang kahalagahan ng aming kapaligiran.
So we started tree planting endemic tree species, and this includes the young people from the community so that they will know how to protect the environment, that they will be the second liner in the communities as well.
Habang nagpo-proseso naman ng mga prutas ng mga punong ito upang pagkunan ng dagdag kita at hindi naputulin ang mga puno na siyang pumuprotekta sa aming panahon ng kalamidad,
We also process the fruits of these three species as additional source of income for the community, so that people will not be cutting trees which are protecting the communities and the people during calamities.
Sige po. Nakipagkaisa kami sa iba't ibang samahan, organisasyon upang mapalawak namin ang aming hanay sa pangangalaga ng kapaligiran at ang aming komunidad. Ilan dito ay ang RENA Federation at ang Haribon Foundation. At naglabi kami ng ordinansa sa aming lokal na pamahalaan upang mabuo ang pulisiyang lalo magpapalakas sa aming inisyatiba kung kaya naipasa ang organic ordinance sa bayan ng General Nakao.
So we started partnership with other organizations in the community who are also into the protection of the environment, such as the Reno Federation and Haribon Foundation. And also we lobbied for ordinances that will help us in protecting the environment. That's why we have the Organic Agriculture Ordinance in the municipality of General Nakar. The ordinance is also, part of the ordinance is also the protection of the forest and the communities that in the whole area of General Nakar.
Taon-taon ay dinadaos namin ang aming Patikim Festival. Bilang simbolo ng pasasalamat sa mga organisasyong tumulong sa amin sa pagbangon mula sa dilubyo. Paglaya mula sa mga teknolohiyang nakasisira sa kalikasan at pagkatali sa pagkakautang. Kampanya at panawagan sa pagkilos ng mga kapwa magsasaka, mga nakikiisang pamahalaan na nakiisa sa layunin ng magsasaka upang sama-samang kumilos para sa kalikasan, sa likas kaya, abot kamay, abot kaya at ligtas na pagkain para sa lahat at paghanda sa climate change. Kami rin mga magsasaka ay nanindigan at tutulan ang mga proyekto ng programang nakasisira sa kalikasan at tumahadlang sa aming pagsusulong ng likas kayang pagsasaka katulad ng dam, malalaking minahan at iba pa. At ang panghuli po ay kaming mga magsasaka ang aming kabuhayan. Ang aming kabuhayan ay nakaasa sa kalikasan. Kung ito ay tutuluyang masisira, paano na ang mga maralitang magsasaka? Paano na ba ang tao kung walang kalikasan? Kaya dapat na patuloy na protektahan ang inang kalikasan, siya ay may buhay din, hindi man nakakapagsalita, subalit naiparamdam din na siya ang kailangang pangalagaan at protektahan.
So her final slide, she said that with the farmers, our livelihood and lives are tied to our environment and the environment. If this is totally destroyed, how are we going to survive? How are the people going to survive without the environment and without nature? So that's why we have to protect Mother Nature. She is our life and she is also alive. She wasn't able to speak, but she can tell us in a different way that we need to protect her and we need to care for her. So that's her final word. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Nanay Virgie. That is very humbling. And that powerful message you leave us with, that we are not separated from the environment. We're very much part of it. We will now hear from Rodolfo, who's known as Don Don Jr., who will address the theme of organizing for change. Don Don is an active and energetic MASIPAG farmer trainer and people's organization leader of BACAS, a people's organization member of MASIPAG in Cabancalan City, Negros Occidental. Don Don is actively involved in conducting training with co-farmers on sustainable agriculture and agroecology in other people's organizations across the country. He's currently the chairperson of MASIPAG Visayas Regional Management Team, as well as of the MASIPAG National Committee for Local Marketing and Processing Support. Over to you, Don Don.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Jajet. Good afternoon, everyone. This is my presentation. My presentation is the Bayanihan in Changing Climate Change. I'm Rodolfo Cortez Jr., a farmer leader from MASIPAG. Bayanihan is a local term in Filipino which means community spirit, mutual help, or to work together without expecting anything in return. It is Filipino cultural value that means people unite to help individuals and communities, highly practiced before modern agriculture was introduced. At present, this practice has been revived by Masipag farmers because of the commitment to recover lost agrobiodiversity and control overproduction, resources for food security and sovereignty, and to strengthen the coping mechanism amidst climate crisis. The world passes 400 ppm carbon dioxide threshold permanently. This is the climate crisis in the Philippines. Philippines is composed of 7,641 islands in 3 regions, the Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. It is one of the world's largest archipelago. Philippines is located on the western edge of the Pacific Ocean, along the Ring of Fire, where countries are most affected by climate change. According to the World Risk Organization Risk Report in 2018, the Philippines ranked 3rd in terms of disaster risk index. On average, the country is visited by 20 tropical cyclones annually. According to the Philippine Statistics Authority, extreme events and disaster from 2010 to 2019, they cost the economy of 463 billion pesos and cost as much as 12,097 life deaths. And this is the impact in agriculture. One is the rising sea levels. They cause salt water intrusion, and then prolonged drought, less water from crop production, especially in rice. In early 2019, farming communities experienced one of the worst dry spell like El Nino ever recorded in the Philippine history. The local agriculture authority already reported 464 million pesos production loss due to dry spell, with a rice 88% as the most affected crops. But this is the farmers' response. Bayanihan, the spirit of community, communal unity, work of cooperation is a traditional system of mutual assistance and solidarity in rural communities. Bayanihan instilled the value of sharing, cooperation, and communal unity to capacitate farmers and mitigating the ill effects of climate change and facilitate the improvement of the economic condition of farmers and provide food to family and community. This is the Farmer Scientist NGO partnership and cooperation. This is the alliance building of the tri-partnership of farmers, NGO, and scientists. The NGO organizing capacity building and the scientist technology development and research, and the power of the farmer improvement, resilience to the rural development. And what has been achieved? The conservation and improvement of the traditional rice varieties and the farmer bred varieties and the Masipag rice. The Masipag network have 50,000 individual farmers to the 511 people's organization and 159 farmer trainers. They have 38 scientists, and also 48 non-government organizations. They have more than 2,000 plus varieties of rice in Masipag, and also they have 150 trial farms from the Masipag People's Organization members. This is the climate resilience varieties. The farmers collectively develop and identify the rice varieties adapted to their local needs and ecosystem, like drought tolerant and flood tolerant, tolerant to the salt, water intrusion, and pest and disease resistance. In Masipag, they identify 106 varieties of rice in drought resistance, and also 7 varieties of saltwater resistance, 48 varieties of rice in heavy rain resistance, and also 42 varieties of rice in pest resistance, 14 varieties of flood resistance, and 48 varieties of rice to the strong wind resistance. Next. This is the improvement of local ecosystem to attain resiliency and diversify. Crop diversification and livelihood, poultry integration creates beneficial synergy that support sustainable food production and biodiversity. The efforts in strengthening the environment resilience from the natural disaster result to a resilient community. Deeper sense of unity and solidarity among farmers and communities. Mobility affected by the lockdowns of COVID-19 affected food transportation. In the spirit of bayanihan, farmers shared their produce with the community through pantries. And also, the youth involvement. Farmers' member children are trained and involved in production and processing as a second liner. They also take part in cultural campaign and advocacy related activities. And what shall be improved? Further strengthening of people's organization. The success of maintaining of 150 trial farms and seed banks among their activities roots from unity and cooperation. While some people's organizations have reached that certain level, some need further strengthening. And also the adapting to the new normal. The cost of COVID-19. While there have been many accomplishments despite pandemic-related lockdowns, the network continued to adapt an effort to consolidate its member and alliances. And also the sustaining of campaign and advocacy activities. As economic, political, and environmental challenges continue to arise, a strong and united network is always the key to influence national and international policies. This is the parable of a boat can get to its destination fast and safely when everyone rows at the same pace direction. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Don, for sharing the various different ways in which you're organizing for change. And thank you for sharing that. It's an honor to hear from you. So our next speaker from MASIPAG is Alfie Wulimbarit, who will focus on the theme of climate justice. Alfie is the national coordinator of MASIPAG and currently oversees the MASIPAG Climate Change Resiliency Program. He used to head the Information, Communication and Advocacy Unit of the MASIPAG National Secretariat as its National Advocacy Officer. He also served as the Secretariat of the Stop Golden Rice Network, a regional campaign network of more than 30 organizations across Asia. So before I hand over to you, Alfie, could I please remind the audience that feel free to ask questions through the Q&A function on Zoom. Thank you so much. Over to you, Alfie. Sorry, just checking. Alfie, are you there? Yes.
Yes.
We can't hear you.
Yeah. For a
Okay,
while.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so anyway, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you very much to our presenters, no? Gavin, Nanay Virgie, and Kuya Don for the wonderful presentation regarding beyond technocentrism, knowing climate and organizing for change. Our journey has led us now on climate justice. So let me start by showing you a picture who has effectively captured the situation of the Filipinos and perhaps by disadvantaged people globally in the wake of disaster. So same storm, but on the different boats. This figure of speech has been used quite often, especially during the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic or during disasters. This figure of speech has resounded so much with regards to equity, justice in the midst of disasters. While climate change has impacted people all across the globe, it has impacted the most vulnerable, especially those coming from developing countries. As such, climate change is an issue of equity and justice. As been shared by our presenters earlier, climate change has caused multiple burdens to people, specifically people in the rural areas. Small farmers suffer from stresses on crop production and livestock, disruption of seasonal development of crops, pest and disease cycles, and agricultural workers are affected by heat-related stress, labor displacement as seasons are becoming more erratic, affecting jobs. Rural women also suffer from increase in gender-based violence, and their ability to do work could be threatened as they perform more work tied on the environment, such as the availability of water, food, and provision of the needs of the family. Indigenous peoples whose lives are inextricably linked to the resources provided by the environment suffers from increasing pressures on natural resources. They are forced to relocate because their lands are becoming uninhabitable, and their situation are further compounded by political and economic marginalization. Environmental workers are also suffering, for they campaign for conservation and care of the environment, resulting in increased intimidation, especially by big businesses and corporations as well. It's been shared also by our presenter, Mr. Cortez. Much of the problem that besets our people can be rooted to the intensifying corporate control in food and agriculture, made worse by the neoliberal globalization. Basically, climate change investments operate under the neoliberal globalization in mitigation and adaptation technologies and programs. Corporate control has been intensifying, and its agenda is permeating in public policy spaces such as the Conference of Parties. In 2021, the UN Food System Summit is basically chaired by Agnes Calibata, of the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, or AGRA, which is backed by philanthrocapitalist Bill Gates. Current global policies and programs are reverberating corporate solutions through the fourth industrial revolution. So the dominating solutions include support to climate-smart agriculture, GM crops, geoengineering or the deliberate intervention in the climate system to counteract man-made global warming, which includes ocean fertilization, giant orbiting mirrors, deep sea carbon dioxide injection, artificial trees, among others. And you also have carbon trading schemes, which give corporations, industrial countries, a license to pollute and pay projects to developing countries while they continue polluting and doesn't reduce emissions globally. Wherein the pay mostly goes to the consultant, not to the farmers and the vulnerable communities, and that this scheme is also ushering a new form of colonialism, which is called carbon colonialism. Questions on the right of nations to also develop as nations are questions on the right of nations to develop are also emerging as nations are fighting over the carbon budget. Developing countries are being prodded to limit our development activities as developed nations continue to pollute. Climate development mechanisms or greening programs has also displaced indigenous people, and contradictions arise between communities. And these programs compete with food production and promote monoculture plantations. All of these are technocentric, technofixed solutions or approaches to mitigation being perpetuated by corporations which people and the environment which people and the environment are put at the wayside for profit. Delving deeper, neoliberal globalization has benefited huge corporations the world over. Neoliberal globalization, or the integration of the world's economies based under neoliberalism, an ideology and policy model that emphasizes the value of free market competition. Under the pretense of neoliberal globalization, mass production of commodities knows no limits, continue to expand to sustain its profitability. Everything is all about sales and market share if they are to survive in cutthroat competition, pushes for the increased consumption of goods, among others. Under the framework of neoliberal globalization, there is this expansionary drive for profit, resulting to an ever larger exploitation of natural resources in other lands, increased production of waste, and we are nearing our environmental limits to produce resources and absorb waste, resulting to breaching the Earth's natural threshold. There is a clear contradiction between neoliberal globalization and the people's interest and the environment, resulting to pollution, the collapse of ecosystems, environmental changes that affect long-term sustainability and survival of the species. Basically, neoliberal globalization is wasteful, destructive, and an inefficient system. In sum, the corporate agenda is perpetuating climate injustice. Market-based mechanisms promoted by huge transnational corporations are false solutions and are exacerbating the problem. Those who contribute the least emission per capita, such as the Philippines, suffer most of the impacts of climate change. Climate change cannot be solved just by technological fix, and that the current solution to climate change has been put within injustice frameworks, market-oriented versus the human and ecological framework. So whose solutions are we pushing for? Whose climate? Whose change? Are we pushing for a biofuels climate, genetic engineering climate, a market climate, an agribusiness climate, an experts climate, or are we making things clearer and tend to contribute further to the climate of contradiction, or will we push for a people's climate? been said earlier, climate change exacerbates social injustices. And as such, for climate justice to be addressed, the root of inequality should be of primary concern to all of us. What is just, especially to our food producers? Collectively, farmers share the social responsibility to feed society. For generations, they have nurtured and bred our food crops and have conserved and improved the genetic resources that form the basis of food and agriculture. With farmers' responsibility to feed society and stemming from their enormous contribution comes farmers' rights. Farmers have rights over their innovations, practices, knowledge, technologies, and biological resources evolved through generations over the factors and processes of production, which includes land, capital, technology, and inputs, and over legal and political decisions that undermine their ability to produce food and conserve genetic resources. Farmers' rights are thus collective rights, and farmers are not owners, but stewards of our biodiversity and genetic resources. They must be free to produce food and must be appreciated, recognized, protected, and strengthened in their work by their inalienable and inviolable rights relating to seeds, production, biodiversity, and genetic resources, politics and decision-making, culture and knowledge, land, information and research, and socio-political factors. So what do we mean when we say climate justice, and how do we attain it? Achieving social and climate justice requires addressing the historic and ongoing injustices that have contributed to the current existential climate crisis and empowering local communities to participate in the climate decision-making processes. There should be recognition of responsibility. We think that before we demand for compensation, we should demand the stop of economic plunder in developing countries to enable them to enable developing countries to adapt to climate change impact. There should also be reparation for loss and damages to compensate for the irreversible effects to communities. And that developing countries should also be made to reclaim their development space as climate change has concrete impact on their development prospects. To be clear, development should be based not on neoliberal globalization, but food sovereignty and agroecology. And that contradiction is not between development and environment, but neoliberal globalization and overproduction. So a lot of writing has been done to capture the initiatives of social movements, farmers, development workers, scientists, with regards on how to go about an emerging politics of hope and resilience, which is flourishing in the middle of despair and violence. So actually, I've got this title of Practicing Hope by our colleague from Australia, Sarah Wright. She's written a very nice paper about practicing hope. Apart from that, there are a lot of papers basically describing how MASIPAG has been practicing hope in the middle of challenges, not only in climate change, but also socio-economic, political, and other challenges as well. And the stories and experiences of farmers that we just heard are testament to this. So what is the way forward? In the final analysis, beyond the adaptation and mitigation approaches, for us to survive this extinction level event, we have by all means should support local initiatives for resilience to climate change with and by farmers, stop corporate control of agriculture and food, demand climate justice, and demand climate emergency. Maraming salamat po and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Alfie, for outlining the whole concept of climate justice from the perspective of MASIPAG, of the farmers, and your deep thinking on this area. We now move to Professor Sarah Wright to take us through the emotional geographies of change and to discuss the paper that she led in writing, which has been published in the journal Third World Quarterly. And indeed, the paper is entitled Feeling Climate Change to the Bone, a term that she coined after the fieldwork that she and Gavin conducted in the Philippines in 2017. Sarah will also discuss the implications and importance of the very rich presentations we have heard today. Sarah is a future fellow in Geography and Development Studies at the University of Newcastle. She works in critical development studies, particularly on geographies of food and Indigenous and post-colonial geographies. She has worked with Filipino social movements for 25 years and is part of two Indigenous-led research collectives, the Pawaka Collective and the Yandara. Over to you, Sarah.
Thanks so much, Jajita, and thanks everybody. I just want to start by saying I'm sitting today and zooming in from Gumbaynggirr country in New South Wales in Australia. So I want to pay my respects to elders past, present and future, and to country, this beautiful country itself. Thanks everyone for being here today, to Jajit, Monash and MASIPAG for organising this event. I feel so privileged to be part of this discussion and to hear these really important and powerful perspectives from those facing climate change on the front line and from some of the inspiring leaders, the farmer leaders, the advocacy leaders, and both that are part of MASIPAG network. So thank you so much. Thank you, Nano Virgie and Kuyadon, for these bringing your wonderful and powerful insights, to Alfie and Jory and Gavin for these contributions. There's so much to bring out. I'm going to have a bit of a go. I've been writing notes, but I just will see this as part of an ongoing conversation and an ongoing connection as we try to work together to create some of these changes. It's been really potent hearing about some of the practices the POs are doing as collectives on the ground in agriculture, as well as through campaigning and those conceptualizations around and organising for climate justice. So one of the most important things to take away, I think, as everyone has underlined, is the importance of hearing from the people on the grassroots when thinking about climate change, designing responses that include a wide range of practices from livelihood and local actions to lobbying and campaigning on many levels with an awareness of moving towards climate justice. I think this is a key message that's come through the forum, that we must foreground the knowledges and responses of people experiencing extreme weather on the ground, both their critique of current approaches, which is so powerful, being the ones experiencing it and being able to look out and make these calls for change around equity and justice. But also to understand, what is climate change actually mean, the experiences of what climate change is, what its impacts are, and then foregrounding strategies, knowledges and determination to change on so many different levels. How might we all learn from this and collectively organise to create change and seek climate justice? I mean, there's been an important thread as well through today pointing about the need to attend to these lived experiences of climate and climate change in order to counter this technocentrism, techno-optimism, the neoliberal and recolonising approaches that underpin many dominant climate change approaches, as Gavin and Alfie laid out so strongly. It matters how climate change is understood and responded to. While the world faces intense and destructive impacts of climate change, and people who are marginalised face these intense and destructive impacts so strongly, we've heard that so powerfully from Kuyudon and Nano Virgie, some examples of that on a community level, saltwater intrusion and drought, and from Alfie at broader levels. It's devastating, as came through the presentations, that many people marginalised by the current system also face threats from climate maladaptation. So rather than adapting, it's a maladaptation. So that many mainstream responses to climate change that are purportedly meant to help actually bring negative impacts. They make things worse. The corporate agenda is perpetuating climate injustice, as Alfie pointed out. And it can happen on so many levels. On a local level, a project to build a seawall might involve cutting of trees and mangroves so that the problem is intensified. International funding mechanisms that allegedly support adaptation might then be promoting industrial agriculture, as we heard, GMOs, geoengineering, and that this makes things actually harder for local communities on the ground, and particularly those people who are marginalised, displacing Indigenous people, small farmers. This is climate change in the corporate hijacked, as Alfie said. So many of these responses at all different scales lead to an intensification of the kinds of problems that got us all in this mess in the first place. Yet activists, and as we've heard today, a strong thread around the different ways that community leaders, farmer leaders, POs, advocates, and critical scholars alike have pointed out the ways that these reflect dominant norms linked to existing topographies of power, and that these need to be fought against. Within this hierarchy, so many of the rich insights of, like what we've heard today, then become absent. They're unnoticed, unaddressed, actively silenced in national and international climate change policies and disaster assessments. So today, I feel like with this webinar with these fantastic speakers that we've been hearing, we have all of us listening have been called to engage more deeply, listen more intently, think more openly, and act with greater solidarity in the face of these changes. I noticed, I guess, some key leavings or potential takeaways that I thought I would try to draw out. Sort of in my role as a bit of someone reflecting back some of the things that we've heard. And firstly, I think, is how all the presentations point to the power and resilience of communities, of those on the ground. In particular, the stories point to the importance of collaborative approaches that draw on place-based knowledge. Responding to climate change is not an individual affair. It's not technocratic, it's not abstract. It's people organising together. For example, Kuyudon's discussion of the revival of Bayanihan and the diverse ways that PO members and community members help each other collectively without expecting anything in return. The wide range of activities that farmers and people's organisations are doing, including innovative agricultural practices, plant breeding and selection, where we see the social, cultural, physical and ecological all combined. It's so inspiring, so cutting edge, and should be prioritised, should be promoted and foregrounded in discussions. We also heard about other forms of collaboration as well, with scientists and NGOs, with local government and the academe. And I think this webinar as well is an example of this, of the way that voices can be amplified and heard, and how collaborative change can begin, or not begin, but how it can be pushed forward further. So there's scope for power and resilience in these collaborations on so many different levels. I think a second thing that really came through is the wide range of experiences of loss and damage felt by climate change. Some of these are economic, yes, about livelihood, but go well beyond that. The disruptions to life and culture, the impacts on food security, on water security, on place and the environment, and then the long-term consequences of this, the potential to impact multi-generationally in terms of transfer of culture and knowledge and links to land and place. Nene Verji spoke so eloquently and movingly about many of the past and ongoing experiences from Quezon province after tropical depression Winnie. both the experiences of the negative, but also the potential then for change, for people to collaboratively work together. So then the third point, and this is where I guess is around emotions. And I was asked to speak a little bit about this based on the article that actually, in a way, was an impetus for this webinar today. I actually thought I'd mention, it resonates a lot. I have an honours student right now, a student who's working, she's currently in Samoa, but she's been working in Tuvalu in the Pacific, an atoll nation, which has been completely inundated by sea level rises, one on the very forefront of climate change. She spoke to 76 different people going around different very tiny atoll nations. You can stand and look and see the sea on both sides, just a mere half a metre, the highest point of the whole country at points. She asked them if they believed emotions were important in discussions of climate change impact, and every single person responded yes, overwhelmingly and quickly. So one of the participants said, without emotions, there is no proof of impact of climate change. Emotions explain and describe what happens. So we can see the discussion in it looking from the academe in terms of work in emotional geographies too, speaking about how the importance of emotions in understanding the world and how it's lived, how it's experienced, and how might it be changed. So that rather than these dominant technical, scientific and capitalist neoliberal approaches that might dismiss or denigrate lived experience, this tries to reculture climate change, bring people back in and place. Emotions shape and are shaped by our worlds and at many different scales. So emotions are not just held by people in communities who see the sea level rise towards them, not held by women and children only, but also in global decision-making arenas where fear-based, control-based, arrogance-based, greed-based decision-making is what propels what goes on. So we can see that emotions help understand what climate change is, what it means to experience it, including in terms of non-economic loss and damage, and moving forward to thoughts around compensation for non-economic loss and damage. How we might critique mainstream approaches. Emotions help understand and propel struggle. So we've heard stories of grief and fear, sadness, worry, the sharing of Nana Virgi of people tearing up just to remember what happened. The links to place and the loss that happens when those links are hurt. And we've also heard of anger, determination, fierceness, care for each other and for place. The responses of the Social Action Centre, creating meetings, people then joining MASIPAG to rise from the muck, as Nana Virgi said. So these collective rebuilding of livelihoods and practices and planning together. So I think pulling these three points together is what we can learn about justice on so many different levels. What does justice mean? What do we need to do for it to take place? What needs to happen? And that this is collaborative work. Such a strong message came through today. With people going on to COP28, there's a lot of discussion about how to move forward. But we must ask, who are the excluded voices? Where are the excluded places? What do they have to say? What can we learn from working together? And the environment, so that environment resilience equals a resilient community, as Kuya Don said. And I'd conclude then today with the message that I think has come through strongly, and that is that climate change and weather can create different kinds of changes and can be a way forward of solidarity and connection. Through the speakers, we've heard many stories, in Bayanihan's stories of creating and organising change, giving a deeper sense of unity and solidarity among farmers and communities. And also then the potential for this to happen on other levels with NGOs and internationally as well. In the face of this changing climate, society is forced to change, and there is scope for reconfigurations, for new ways of knowing and doing to emerge, for new priorities of the kinds of priorities mentioned. Well, they're not new for people who are doing them, but paying attention to them would be a welcome change, for different kinds of connections to be found. We're bound together in climate change, even as we have different places within frameworks, different boats, as Alfie said, and we need to learn from and support the voices of those most affected. We need to create change in our own places in solidarity. And I say that with full awareness and acknowledgement that there's a great deal that both the government of Australia and its people need to change to be good citizens in this space, to support climate justice and to act in true solidarity. It is, I think, vital to continue to turn inwards rather than away from accounts that have been shared here, to engage with the complexity of the world in ways that nourish these possibilities for joint response, for people to take responsibility from their own place and from there for a co-emergence. Indeed, the visions and understandings of connection that are shared have been shared today point to much more dynamic, more nuanced, more real and grounded understandings of climate change and of climate justice, including this requirement, as was stated, around acknowledging and repairing around historic and ongoing injustices that have contributed to current crises. Empowering local communities to be part of that and to understand reparations as from its root of repair, repairing relationships, repairing land, repairing through financial and other kinds of reparations in the face of climate change, but also the ongoing exclusions and devastating oppressions that have led up to this situation that we're currently in. As Nane Vergy said so strongly, Mother Nature may not speak, but she can lead us. We are part of her and we are connected to each other. And justice becomes so deeply entwined with all from different places, felt all the way through it all, felt to the bone. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Sarah. That was all so eloquently brought together, and it's been just a wonderful afternoon here in Melbourne, listening to all of you. Thank you for the rich sharing, everyone, for all the work that you've put together in your presentations, and for creating something that we're sharing here. And sharing across disciplines, across countries. And so I think that's really important. I'm going to open up the Q&A session now. And there are some questions that have already received some responses, but I'll open it up because I'd like the panel to verbally talk to the rest of the participants about these issues. So the first question was actually for Nane Vergy. This is a really interesting question. What examples of traditional and local forms of knowledge exist in the REINA communities that help them predict weather events and adapt to a changing climate? How are these forms of knowledges supported or undermined by experts such as development actors, government, and academia? Over to you, Nane Vergy.
Sige na yung tanong niya kung ano raw yung mga napansin ninyo, yung sinagot niyo kanina.
Siguro so sa akin ang napansin ko noong mga panahon na yon, nung bago yung dilubyo sa aming lugar, ay yung aming pusa ay hindi siya makalik. Wala siyang tigil ng akyat manaog, tapos siya ay ingaw ng ingaw.
So before the flash flood, she noticed that their pet cat is very jittery, and she's going up and down the stairs. So that's one indication that there will be something, you know, horrible will happen. So that's she mentioned earlier that because most of the people regard this as a superstition, only as a superstition. So that's how it was retained in the community. It's just a superstition, but that's her observation. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that's
May idagdag. No more.
No
Yeah.
more.
oh, thank you so much.
She's ready to answer the second question, actually.
All right. So the second question is there a need to develop seed varieties which bring, which, um, so I'll read it out and tell me who would like to answer this one. Is there a need to develop seed varieties which bring together the needed characteristics to adapt to climate change? Now they stand alone, drought resistance, salt resistance. So
Meron daw bang pangangailangan? I think Ate Jory answered the question. She might want to.
Jory, do you want to address this question?
Yes, thank you. I have typed the answer to the question of Marcos, but I'd like to reiterate that because the breeding work that we have in Masipag is a farmer-led breeding, wherein farmers identify the characteristics of the seed to be developed that are adapted to their local conditions, and one is adapted to climate change. So those seed varieties that are developed are now in fact spread in the trial farms and in the individual farms of the farmers across the network. So it is important to develop seed varieties that are adapted to specific conditions of the farmers' fields. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jory. I'd just like to add that question, the first question that we had about examples of traditional local forms of knowledge. I just read and heard somewhere that when the tsunami hit in 2004 in the Nicobar and Andaman Islands, there was one group of indigenous peoples who survived, and that was because there was a poem in their language that when all the water recedes, then go up the hill. And so in the rest of the islands, they had a huge loss of life. But in this particular island, one of the elders started singing that song, which was a poetic song, and everybody heard that and they took off to the hills. So I think this is really important. It's a very important example of diverse knowledge systems and dealing with catastrophic climate change. So here, Nana Verji has said that our animals seem to be very jittery. So the animals got jittery and they start moving around this way and that way. And that might be a sign. That is a sign that something is going on, because sometimes animals pick it up before humans do. So this is a really interesting question. Let's move on to the next question then. So the next question is from Fangli Cook, Professor Fangli Cook from Monash. And this particular question is for Alfie. What do you think multinational companies should do to contribute to climate justice in the Asia Pacific region in general and in Thailand specifically?
Okay. Apologies because I cannot speak for people from Thailand. I'm not do not know much with regards to their context. But with regards to how multinational companies should do to contribute to climate justice, I think the point is that multinational companies, the reason for being is basically market oriented and for profit. And like what I have said or shared earlier, this type of approaches with regards to food production and everything would basically lead to harmful impact to the environment. I do not have a very specific suggestion with regards on how multinational companies could contribute to climate justice because climate justice, like what has also been shared earlier, is basically it's answering the injustices to vulnerable communities as well. Possibly the first thing that multinational companies should do is to recognize the contribution of how corporations has contributed to the impacts of climate change. And the second one is to basically, if there are practices in developing countries, I think they should basically to stop these practices to enable the countries to adapt to the changing climate. And if ever the companies will be willing, and sorry, it's not the question of they should be willing, they should put themselves with regards to policies under the United Nations with regards to reparation. I think it was the topic last COP28, if I'm not mistaken. So these are the things that I think would answer the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alfie. Yeah, thank you very much. That brings us back to that whole maladaptation that Sarah was referring to, and some of the technocentric approaches, such as let us use AI in agriculture to solve the climate crisis, or let us use genetically modified seeds without looking at actually what this has contributed, how this has contributed to climate change to begin with. We have a question from Lance Patrick to Nanai Verji. What agricultural technologies destroyed your livelihood and made you indebted? So what particular agricultural technologies destroyed your livelihood and made you indebted?
Teknolohiya na nakasira ng inyong kinabukasan at nagpabaon sa inyo sa utang.
Ang mga teknolohiya na nakasira sa kalikasan at napagpabaon sa mga magsasaka sa pagkakautang ay ang teknolohiya ng Green Revolution.
May particular ba sa Green Revolution?
Particular yung nila yung Masagana 99 na kung saan ay hindi masagana nung ulan, pero nung sumunod ay wala na, hindi na siya masagana. Sa paggamit ng mga chemical na input, pestisidyo, at mga high-yielding varieties.
Yeah. So, the technology in particular was brought by the Green Revolution. The Green Revolution technologies like the use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides. Earlier in the implementation of the program, there were increase in yield, but eventually the technology, especially the destruction of the soil and the environment, made the farmer indebted. So in our experience, it is the Green Revolution technology that I was referring to.
There's a second part to the question. How did the trial farms specifically help sustainable agriculture?
Paano daw nakatulong ang trial farm sa sustainable agriculture?
Siyempre, malaki yung tulong ng trial farm dahil yung mga magsasaka ay doon na kaya nagka-trial farm, doon napipili ng binhi na naaangkop sa sariling sakahan. So hindi na aasa sa mga binibigay na binhi, kundi mismo na magsasaka ang magsasaliksik. Kaya nagkaroon kami ng trial farm at ito ay aming iniingatan para at least ito na yung aming pagkukuna ng sarili namin binhi. Natuto kami na hindi kami palasa.
Yeah. So in our trial farm, this is where we get the seeds for our production, which is adapted to our local conditions. So we don't need to buy seeds from other sources. So the seeds that we are planting are coming from trial farm. We don't buy any inputs for that, and that is why it is helping sustainable agriculture.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that whole idea about not buying seed from the market tells you immediately that there's another system that has been put into place, which is different to the Green Revolution. We have a question by Huzaima, and she says, hello, I'm so interested by this topic. Since I'm not that familiar with seed climate resistant or climate resistant seeds, that you also said the farmers even led this kind of project in the observation area. I wonder how seed climate resistance were made. Like, were they made in laboratories, or did you achieve this on the farm through crossbreeding? She just wants to know how you develop resistant seeds. So Don, do you want to address that, or who would like to address that?
Can I answer, but Nang Jury will answer in English?
Okay, yes.
Okay. Yung mga adapted na resilience sa flood and water intrusion ay na-discover yon ng mga farmer na kagaya ko. Lalo na yung nanggaling sa trial farm kasi doon siya nakatanim, di ba? Para sa enhanced na research. Kaya na-develop yon ng mga farmer at nakita na matibay siya sa tubig alat, o kaya nakita siya na matibay siya sa drought. Kaya isa yon sa mga nakuhang data ng buong Masipag.
So, yes, I will try to translate. So the seeds that are observed to be climate resilient were first observed in the trial farms that were established by the POs. And then from the observations, the farmers select and identify the characteristics of each varieties, which have specific agronomic characteristics. Those living near, like for example, near the areas where saltwater intrusion is happening, in the trial farms that are located in such kind of environment. So the farmers are able to identify which of these are resistant to saltwater intrusion and the drought resistance and etc. And I'd like to add that the breeding works, the seed improvement done by the Masipag farmers are done on site. It's not in the laboratory. So we do in situ rice breeding and seed development. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So the farmer is the scientist. They are the scientists on the ground observing and looking at what works, what doesn't work over time. Scientist observes. That's their main job. And so this is a really important task that MASIPAG is involved in. Next question from Len Taiko. How much of current rice production in the areas covered by MASIPAG, or maybe in the Philippines in general, are of climate resilient variety? He's also said that very inspiring presentations and a salute to our farmers here in the Philippines and to MASIPAG. So how much of the current rice production in the areas covered by MASIPAG are of the climate resilient variety? Jory, did you want to take that one?
Can I also already answer?
Yes.
To answer that? Okay. The varieties of Masipag varieties is more than 2,000 plus of varieties. The traditional rice and the rice farmer bred and the M lines or Masipag lines. But they have 106 of adapted to the drought, and also 7 varieties of salt and water intrusion, and also the 48 varieties of rice in heavy rain, and also the 42 varieties of rice in pest resistance, and also 14 varieties of rice in flood resistance, and also 48 varieties of rice in for the strong winds resistance. That is the all varieties in Masipag throughout the Philippines for the all members of the Masipag POs. Thank you.
So that's 50,000 farmers, Don. That's correct? Throughout the
Yes.
Philippines.
More than 50,000 individual farmers in 511 people's organization.
Right. Okay, thank you so much. The next question is from an anonymous attendee. How can we promote a transition in farming from the use of pesticides to organic farming in the whole of the Philippines?
Can I answer that?
Please.
Yes, this is Rowena Buena. No? So transitioning from conventional to organic farming in the Philippines actually is not that very easy. It's not just the technology that you are changing. It's actually the mindset and the heart of the farmers that to have to be changed first. And this is not an easy process, especially if they are surrounded by a lot of promotion, technology, support, by chemical companies, seed companies, and even the government. So this will be a big challenge, no, for not only for Masipag but all the organizations who are into this kind of advocacy. But it can be done. So because it is already being done and have been done by Masipag, so we just have to continue doing that, promoting what we are doing and strengthening farmers and farmers organization in the field, because from our experience, the farmer to farmer mode of transfer is the best kind of, like promotion and transfer of technology. So maybe little by little or in the year 5 or 10 years from now, it will be a full transition, especially with what we are experiencing right now, with the climate change and the drop of prices of rice and all of the challenges of the farmers and climate change as well. So yeah, I think hopefully more farmers will transition here in the Philippines. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I think when people do it and it works, then more farmers join. So the demonstrative effect is really important. The one case I know of is the state of Sikkim in India, Sikkim, where they have turned fully organic as a state. They want to make it clean. And so it comes with a lot of political will to support such a system. So it is working in some places. Let's move on. And we have a question from Marcus Walter. He says, living under the permanent threat of the effects of climate change, mustn't that lead to grief and depression? How do you cope with that?
Yes. Maybe I can start answering that and my colleagues can also contribute. But first, Filipinos are known to be resilient in terms of, whatever calamities, they are able to recover, no? Being a part of the social network, it is not a reason to be depressed because of the social organization that we have in Masipag. Farmers being in a farmers organizations and being in a network, and they don't live alone, no, or individually. So what is important is the bayanihan spirit, the community spirit being alive, because it helps helps everybody to, to recover, to cope up and be strong, despite the challenges, no? Despite the challenges, the effects of climate change that seem to be permanent. But one thing that we have proven in MASIPAG is a social network, a social organization, which provides the emotional, the psychological backup, no, and support among each other. So there's no reason. That's why Filipinos are, keep on smiling despite the problems and challenges that we have. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. I was wondering if Nanay Virgie wanted to talk about that. Nanay Virgie, what helped you when you said that you couldn't speak for a week?
Yun,
quite-
no? Kayo nakapagsalita ng isang linggo. Paano daw kayo nakalagpas doon?
Kumbaga ako sa sarili ko ay nag-isip ako bilang isang farmer, kinakailangan ay ikaw ay matatag. Ano man yung mga problema nga dumating sa ating buhay, kinakailangan ay inaral ko yun na aking maigpawan na kung saan ay kumbaga naglakad-lakad ako nung mga panahon yun, nakita ko ang aming buong kapaligiran ay totally was out. So, hindi lang pala ako ang nagkaganito, ang sarili ko, Diyos ko.
Okay. So, I thought that as a farmer, I should be strong. You know? And what I did after the typhoon and the flash flood is that I walk around the community and I told myself that it is just not me who has experienced this. There are lots of us. Pagkatapos nun, ano pa yung isip niyo?
Inisip ko ay lumipat kami sa ibang lugar, pero yung aking mga anak at asawa ay hindi pumayag. Dito tayo matutulog. Tapos ay yun, hindi kaming unti-unti nila akong kumbaga hinihikaya po sa mga gawain. Kumbaga sila yung pamilya ko ang muling nakapag sa akin yung aking isip.
So
Bilang isang nanay.
So it is my family who helped me get through what I have experienced now. It is us, the whole family. We held on to each other and rise up from that challenge.
Hagulhol ako, halala ko, hagulhol ako ng hagul. Yung mga anak ko, layo, ano niya ako, hayaan niya ako, umiyak ng umiyak. So, ganda nang iyak ako nang siguro wala nang umiyak, pumilip ako ng pusa. At ako dinahimik lang ko, babagod.
So, I was crying the whole time and I was just crying and crying and my children and my husband was just there for me and they let me just, cry and let all my feelings and then eventually when I stopped and then I thought that I am also a mother.
Yes.
And they my family is there. They are my strength as well. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. Again, it's so humbling. And what we're hearing here is family, community. This is how you emotionally deal with, if there's a word, emotional adaptation to this crisis situations, one on top of another and coming about sooner and sooner. Thank you for sharing that with all of us. Another question from Loretta. Thanks to all the presenters, a very informative webinar. For those of us that are not farmers and do not live in these specific locations, what can we do to support climate justice?
Okay, maybe I'll try to answer. So, well, first and foremost is to get yourself involved in organizations that are calling for climate justice. Given this is a global phenomenon, I think even if you're not in the Pacific region, there is a big movement, mobilization for climate justice. Keep yourself informed. By November 30, there will be another conference of parties, COP28, that will be happening in Dubai. and a lot of discussions, dialogues are already happening. And the best thing that people can do if you will not be able to attend to the COP28 physically, to have your voices heard, from your communities to your government units. I think that's the first and foremost thing that we need to do is do solidarity campaigns. You're not affected, but this is a global phenomenon. I think we have to link with each other, specifically the working peoples and rural communities all over the world are suffering from this onslaught. And if we are more vocal, have a stronger voice in our countries, then we hope that it could lend a stronger voice in public policy spaces, such as the UN.
Thank you so much, Alfie. Absolutely, we need to raise our voice in whatever forum we can within our communities, our states, and our country. Okay, there's a question for Kuya. Don. Sorry, Jory. Yes.
Yes, can I make an addition to what Alfie said?
Please.
Yeah, the most I think the most concrete thing that you can support the call for climate justice is to also promote sustainable food systems, support the farmers and farmer-led solutions to sustainable agriculture, agroecology, and support the farmers movement, the local movement in your local areas, and build solidarity among different types of organizations and civil society to create a strong voice. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sarah, did you want to add? I was just about to say.
Yeah, maybe. I very much would echo and thank Elfie and Jory for their thoughts on that. And I guess I would just add that everyone everywhere is part of this situation in terms of climate justice. So here, for instance, in Australia, we're just involved differently. And one of the ways that we're involved, apart from experiencing it in certain other ways, but one of the ways we're involved is by, unfortunately, being part of a place where the government has been a poor player, has been a bad citizen on the international level. So the chance to be involved in climate justice also means holding our own governments to account and our own practices and the ways that we consume more. I mean, the per capita consumption in Australia is so high. So there's a lot of potential for change here, as well as calling on also supporting change in our own lives. Ultimately, because we are all connected, means that that's a way we can actually be involved in supporting climate justice struggles as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sarah. So for Kuya Rodolfo, so Don, you mentioned about saltwater intrusion and prolonged droughts. Has the worsening of climate increased the possibility of debt bondage or the Pambabrat system for farmers? So are farmers getting more indebted because of worsening climate situation?
Okay.
Yes.
The salt and water intrusion and the drought is number one problem of the farmers. But here in the Philippines, the government they have not support the seeds to the drought tolerant and the salt intrusion varieties. Maybe the MASIPAG is introduced these varieties to the MASIPAG farmers. Thank you.
All right.
In addition,
Please, I was about to
yes,
say.
if the government solution to the worsening climate events, no, among the farmers is dependent on chemical agriculture, then it will not help much the farmers. It will not help much the agriculture system, because it is not helping them, no, to be self-reliant. Instead, the government there's very important need for government to provide the appropriate support to our farmers who need, like, for example, instead of providing hybrid seeds and fertilizers, the synthetic fertilizers and inputs, it should be based on organic agriculture. We have a national organic agriculture law, but you know, at the same time, conventional and chemical agriculture is still being supported, and the resources provided by the government is not that sufficient for the farmers to really regain or recover from the effects of climate change through organic farming. So it's really a possibility for farmers to be indebted, because if the agriculture that is being supported and promoted by the government is dependent on chemical agriculture, which require the farmers, you know, to acquire loans, to acquire debts, no? And since agriculture is a vulnerable endeavor, vulnerable to climate change, then the solution should be a more sustainable one, and it should not be chemical agriculture, but instead it is based on sustainable agriculture and agroecology principles. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yuri. And just to say that MASIPAG works with other organizations in other countries. And recently they hosted, before COVID, they hosted a 2-day symposium, actually 3 days, I think, symposium on youth and agroecology. And we had participants from Vietnam and from India there. And that is the same call that the Indian government highly subsidizes chemical or industrial agriculture. And the call from community groups there is, why don't you support sustainable and organic agriculture? Why do you support these high yielding varieties? Because they are causing the problems right now. Monoculture is one of the main problems. For everyone, what implications would the recently passed price ceiling have on farmers and the climate? How would the price ceiling of 41 pesos and 45 pesos affect your livelihoods specifically?
Jacket, can I translate that to our farmers, because I think
Please.
they will be best not to answer this. Nanay Virgie, tsaka Kuya Dondon, ano daw yung epekto sa kabuhayan nitong nagkaroon ng executive order, no, yung ating gobyerno, na yung presyuhan sa retail ay 41 hanggang 45 pesos na lang. Nasa balita siya nitong mga nakaraang araw eh. Ano daw ang epekto nito sa mga magsasaka? Lalo pa ngayon may problema tayo sa klima. Yun po.
Si Nanay Virgie daw, yung kung nakapektuhan ba kayo ng price ceiling ng 41 to 45 pesos, may epekto ba sa inyo?
Parang sa amin bilang magsasakang masipag na nagsusulong ng likas kayang pagsasaka, parang sa amin ay as totally walang masyadong epekto sa amin yung gano'n. Dahil hindi kami bumibili ng binhi, hindi kami bumibili ng pataba, sariling pag-imbak ng pataba, wala kaming pestisidyo, at talagang yung likas kaya, ay kumbaga ay yun talaga yung pagsasaka na kinakailangan natin, dahil malaki yung maitulong sa magsasaka sa ating bansang Pilipinas.
Yeah. So we are not affected by the executive order because as masipag farmers, we don't buy seeds. We don't buy chemical inputs. Our resources, we maximize our own resources. And so we are not affected by these changes brought by the order of the government. We are reliant, no, in terms of seed security and our production system in sustainable agriculture help us to become like this.
Hindi tayo nagbibigta ng ating palay, tapos kung wala tayo talagang surplus, ay nakaano muna talaga sa pamilya. Yung mga pagkain, sinisiguro muna ang pamilya.
And also, we don't sell palay because in the Philippines, you have to sell your palay, no, to be able to, to the rice miller. So, masipag farmers, we don't sell palay, but we sell rice ready for cooking. So we are not tied to the traders in terms of pricing our products. So that's why we are not affected by this executive order.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. The next question. Oh, sorry, Tonton. Yes.
Yes. And you can translate. I speak in Tagalog. Okay. Yung executive order number 39 ni Presidente Marcos ay consuelo de bobo lang yun sa mga Pilipino. Kasi nahiya siya doon sa kanyang sinabi na pabababain niya ng gusto hanggang 20 pesos yung bigas. Na hanggang ngayon ay tumaas na ng 60 pesos. Pero may limit yung kanyang executive order na hanggang 3 months lang. Kasi darating na daw yung anihan. Pero sa aming mga tama yung sinabi ni Nanay Bergie na kami mga magsasaka na masipag farmers ay hindi kami apektado ng executive order niya. Kaya sa lalong-lalo na doon sa mga chemical farming na nandito sa Pilipinas ngayon na napakataas ng presyo ng inputs na binibili ng mga magsasaka na hindi naman siya makakabawi o kaya malulugi lang yung mga farmer kasi pag bumaba na ng gusto yung bigas sigurado bababa yung presyo ng fresh na palay.
Yes, Don said that the pronouncement or the executive order that was issued by the president is just a token, no? It's just a token response because during his campaign, in his presidential campaign for the election last year, he said that when he will become the president, he will reduce the price of rice at 20 pesos per kilo. And now the price of rice here is so high, you know, it's more than 50 pesos per kilo. And it's just temporary because it's only for 3 months. That's the limitation of the executive order because in the next coming 3 months, it will already be harvest season. So it's no longer in effect after 3 months. And organic farmers are not much affected by this executive order because the cost of production is less, no, as compared to conventional farmers who have a high cost of production because they buy seeds, they buy synthetic inputs, fertilizers, chemicals, pesticides, etc. Okay, that's it.
Thank you so much, Jory. It's so important for us to understand that deeply, that actually organic farmers are not caught up in those debt traps. Now we're up to time now. What I'll do is I'll just take one more question and then we'll wrap it up. But somebody's asked me, will we be providing e-certificates for attendees? No, but Monash will send you out an email, and so you will have an official. You have official communication that you attended the webinar. So the last question is, how does various agriculture extension work in the programs implemented by MASIPAG. Is it enough, or this person is asking, is it enough or is it lacking for the organization? I actually think it works really well because I've seen it. But anyway, Jory, how does agricultural extension work?
Yeah, as we said in the presentations given by Nanay Virgie, by Don, and then by Alfie. Masipag, we works with the farmers, and we're helping farmers to become farmer trainers. So the farmer trainers that we have are the ones, reaching out to other farming communities, sharing what their experiences in their conversion from monocropping to diversified farming, from conventional or chemical dependent farming to organic farming. So the extension work is done by the farmers organizations and the trained farmers who are co-trainers of other farmers. Yeah.
Gosh, thank you so much. Can we please give a big hand to the MASIPAG team for their generosity in the rich sharing. It's just, as I said, I feel so honored. We've had quite a few questions, lots of discussion, and this is the way MASIPAG works, folks. This is the way they work. The farmers are at the forefront. They come and talk. They have a participatory management and organization, and I've had, along with Gavin, the privilege of going and seeing this in the Philippines, and Sarah has been working there for 25 years, and there was a time that a group from MASIPAG visited us here in Australia, which was just fantastic. But this is how they work, this is how they organize, and this is yet another they demonstrated, even without knowing it, how absolutely amazing they are, and they give hope to so many others, and around the world, I'd say. So thank you so much to everyone, and thank you to all the attendees who've been with us for 2 hours now, to the panelists. A very big thank you to Addy and Holly at Monash, who've been supporting us through and through. And I wish all of you a beautiful day ahead. And let us keep in touch, and let us communicate about these issues. And we would love to hear from MASIPAG again. And so thank you so very much, particularly to all the speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Jagjet.
Bye-bye.
Anita, Gavin, and Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.